you are planning to buy your first BTO, here are the things that you need to consider before choosing your unit. And at the end, I will reveal the ultimate hack that increases your chance of getting a good BTO number. Let's start with how to know which project to choose. Well, there's a reason why HDB announced the upcoming BTO location at least 3 months ahead of the launch. This is so you can do your research beforehand and decide which launch will suit you and your partner the best. If you are going after the proximity housing grant, then you are limited to being within 4 kilometers away from either your parents or your in-laws. But if you are not tied up to that, then you have more options. While the mature estates are always a crowd favorite, the reality is Singapore has developed so much in the past 20 years that almost every town has a lot to offer. When assessing a BTO project location, here are the things to think about. How close is the nearest MRT station? Don't just check online because sometimes on the internet it can claim like 10 minutes walk, but in reality it's more like a 30 minutes walk. And the next question is it noisy or peaceful? How busy are the streets with cars and people? If you want a quiet place, look for a spot on a calmer street. Next, if you cook a lot, check is there a supermarket or a wet market nearby. The same goes for places to eat out like hawker centers or food courts. Ideally, you want them within a 10 minutes walk. If you have young kids or plan to have kids, check online maps to see how close the primary schools are. If there are schools you especially want your kids to go to, try to pick a BTO within 1 kilometer so you have a better chance of getting in. Even if you're not planning to have kids yourself, buying an apartment near a good school will make your unit more attractive to the next buyers when you are ready to sell the unit in the future. While not essential, having a town center, mall, community center, sports center, or park connector nearby can make the area nicer and even increase the value of your flat when you want to sell it off later on. There's another unique topic that you need to discuss with your partner, which is, are you okay with a 10-year MOP or do you want to get a BTO with the standard 5-year MOP? As you know, with the new HDB classification, Plus and Prime BTOs come with a 10-year MOP and a bunch of other restrictions such as cannot rent out the whole unit even after MOP, some subsidy clawback, ceiling income for the future potential resale buyers, etc. But on the positive side, these Plus and Prime BTOs are located in preferable areas and based on the recent statistics, seem to have less competition at least for now. On the other hand, standard BTOs still have the 5-year MOP, but their location might not be as close to amenities. You and your partner need to discuss what is the long-term plan for your family. Is this BTO for long-term stay or is it for an immediate flip after MOP? If you want a unit in a mature estate but with a 5-year MOP, then you might need to consider whether getting a resale unit will suit your family's needs better. The next decision that you need to make is what type of flat are you aiming for? Do you want to get a 4-room unit or must it be a 5-room unit? Nowadays, 5-room flats are getting more and more rare in BTO. Not all projects would have it, so you need to check first to set your expectations. Assuming you are lucky enough to get a good ballot number, the next step is you need to shortlist many choices for your ideal pick. Picking a BTO flat can be tricky because there are lots of other people applying too, and they all want the best apartment. Think about it. Everyone wants a high floor with a nice view close to the MRT stations and all the shops. The good news is you can actually see what other people are picking online. This way, you can get a feel for which units might disappear before it's even your turn to choose. Don't spend weeks stressing about the perfect flat. Things are moving very fast, so focus on narrowing down your choices a few days before your appointment. By then, you'll have a better idea of what's actually still available and can snag your dream flat. You've probably heard that rule of thumb saying that you should avoid low-level units at all costs. Well, there's some truth to it. Based on my personal experience, units on level 5 and below tend to have a more difficult time selling their unit later on. But it doesn't mean you should automatically outrule any low-level units. Some projects are lucky enough to be built on a higher ground and facing greeneries, so even if it's a low level, it still feels private. How about corridor units? Well, corner units indeed are more sought after, but the good news is that newer HDB projects now no longer have the window facing the corridor like back in the 80s, but you still need to check the unit layout to see whether any random passerby can still see into your kitchen and service yard from the corridor. This will mean it'll be very awkward if you want to get an ice cream from your fridge in your underwear. Another issue with corridor units is that you won't have a lot of space to store your things outside. This is particularly important if you have a baby stroller, have a lot of plants, have expensive bicycles that you don't want to park on the ground floor, etc. The next one is unit orientation. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal, but apparently some people care about the unit orientation and whether you'll get an afternoon sun or not. If this is important to you, then make sure you analyze the map to ensure you pick the right unit. What I think is more important is to ensure you pick a stack that is not facing the expressway, because trust me, the dust and noise level can be so overwhelming, especially if you are on a low or medium level floor. Plus, it will also hurt the resale value of your unit. Another absolute no-no is units that are facing the dumpster. This one really cannot, bro. Really cannot. Especially not if it's a low floor unit and facing the dumpster. The smell, the cockroaches, rats, etc. will make it very hard for you to live there comfortably, and again, also ruins your resale value. If your unit is facing the multi-story car park, this can be a double-edged sword for drivers. Sure, it's super convenient to have your car right there close to your flat, but the downside is you might get bothered by the bright lights from the car park shining into your windows at night. Plus, there can be a lot of noise from the car alarms, people slamming doors, and the engine starting up early in the morning. Some people also like to smoke there, and it will feel a little bit creepy to feel that somebody might be looking into your unit from the dark. So that's just something to think about. If noise is something that concerns you, it might be a good idea to avoid units that are next to lifts or face certain amenities. Amenities such as pavilions are often gathering spots for activities like weddings, funerals, or even community events, which means they tend to attract crowds and can get quite noisy. Another communal area such as parks, courts, playgrounds, and fitness corners can also be noisy, but it depends on the type of the neighborhood itself. In areas with many young families, playgrounds are often well used, while estates with an older population tend to see more activity in the fitness corners. So what if you get a bad queue number and the units left over are all like that? Well, with the recent rule, if you had been invited to book a flat but did not do so even though there were units available above a certain amount, then you will be deemed a second timer for a year in the computer ballot, which basically reduces your BTO chances for the next 1 year. You and your partner will need to discuss in advance what are the deal breakers and whether you just want to swallow the 1 year penalty or just pick any units from what's available. For some people, getting an affordable home as soon as possible might be a priority, but I know some people online mention that they would rather get penalized for 1 year rather than wait for the 3 to 4 years of construction than have to live 5 to 10 years in a home they don't like. So it's really up to you. Next, let's talk about something called the Optional Component Scheme or OCS offered by HDB. Basically, they can install stuff in your flat for you before you move in, such as toilets, doors, and flooring. This can be cheaper than doing it yourself after you collect the keys. But here's the catch. You won't have many choices for the design. So if you have a very specific idea of how your flat should look like, you might be stuck with something that doesn't quite look right. Also, the quality isn't super fancy, but it can work just fine if you take care of it. Another thing to consider, if you buy a flat that has already been offered for sale but not chosen by anyone, such as sale of balance flat, it might already have the OCS done. In that case, you can't really change it. Look, there's no such thing as a perfect BTO flat. Some are definitely better than others, but there will always be some compromises. Figure out what's important to you and what you can live with, because what works for one person might not work for another. Now, let's discuss what's the trick that you can do to increase your BTO chances. BTO application is not on a first come first serve basis. So, to boost your chances of success, the trick is to actually wait until the very last few hours before you apply. Why? Because this way, you can see which projects have the lower application rates and shoot for that. You can check the application rates on the HDB flat portal, which is updated several times a day throughout the application window. Just make sure you have all the requirements on hand and remember to submit your application before the end of sales launch. If you want to know my review of the latest BTO projects, check out my other videos on this channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!